So today we continue on part 2 of intelligent quotients. How do we build new IQ skills in the new world? As we know, the new world has been evolving very fast, very quickly. So last week, we learned my definition of intelligent quotient in the context of the 8 quotients out of 8Q leadership. So we do a very brief recap, and then we'll dive into deeper some of those unusual IQ skills. And then we'll go into the technology trend. What do we need to equip and prepare ourselves in this new world, especially in the world that's AI dominant? It's artificial intelligence, metaverse, AR, VR. What do we do? How can we stay ahead of the world so that we're not replaced, we're not left behind, and we need to learn how to reshape the way that we would live, the way we learn, and the way we live. So let's go in, brief recap on the 8 quotients. So intelligent quotient we know very well, and that's what we're going to focus on today. It's actually my definition of a holistic 360-degree leadership, all-rounded relationship in terms of these 8 quotients, 8Q leadership with our God, which is spiritual quotient, with ourselves, building our own character and our humility and also good health, and then with other people, emotional quotient and leadership quotient, and then finally with relationship with past. So we're going to focus on intelligent quotient, and we'll talk a little bit about transformation, the ever quickly evolving world. And of course, we have adversity quotient, and we won't cover that. So that's really the basis and the framework of how we talk about intelligent quotient. And another way I define the art of 8Q leadership is putting into an acrostic for leaders. For leaders, we need to be good listeners. So you see, E is the excellent learning agility. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And a little bit on the transformational quotient there. XQ, just a very brief mention. So we know there's so much research on leadership, and we know these 4 core areas are often talked about, especially by the Center of Creative Leadership, self-awareness, which is all our relationship with ourselves. Communication is really the foundation for all these quotients, leadership to be best demonstrated, depending on how good we can communicate. That's why I'm so excited teaching the workplace communication course this Thursday for 6 weeks. And then the influence is what leadership boils down to. And then what we focus on today is the learning agility. We learn hard skills, we learn soft skills, and how do we apply what we learn into solving problems. So we started that last week. And then when we think about as Christian in the workplace, these 6M, the one that we care about today, it's the intelligent quotient. How do we make good work? Because we're hired to do good work, right? You're not hired to share the gospel. You're hired to make good work. So we need good intelligent quotient, ability to deal with adversity and changes to make good work. So if we look at various research on what the industry is telling us, and here's an example by Beacon Hill. For 2020 and beyond, they highlighted these 5 areas of skills that are much needed, especially in the world of AI dominance. What are the skills that we need as human beings that cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence? So I summarized them in the context of the 8Q of leadership, and also what I call CAP skill in totality. So problem solving, we already talked about last time. Our IQ end goal is to solve problems. If you're not using what you learn to solve problem, that's not doing anyone any good. So we always think about what problem we're solving. Of course, AI and robots can solve some problem that's logistics, mechanics, and already programmed in. And yet there are problems that are beyond what's programmed into artificial intelligence. So that's where we, human being, comes in. Definitely rise above the occasion, learning in a creative and dynamic way how to solve problems, think out of the box. Robots cannot think out of the box. So we are tuned how to think out of the box. And then we need to have critical thinking. We're going to talk more about critical thinking today. Need to be independent thinker and a group thinker, all building on thinking out of the box, listening to others, and collectively, we can have critical thinking to solve problems in a creative way. So again, machine learning and algorithm are good with what's already programmed and trends already known, and yet it's not able to extrapolate what the conclusion would be or be creative and not able to think out of the box. So we want to be building these 3 skills on the left, which is related to our intelligence quotient, adversity quotient, not afraid of failure, making mistakes, and they're not afraid of changes. And these cannot be handled by artificial intelligence. So problem solving, critical thinking, creative solution. And then on the right, it's all about the people. So these are the other 5 quotients: your character, your emotion, your humility, your leadership, and your spiritual quotient. All these are not handled by artificial intelligence or robots. So we working with people, when we collaborate with others, open-minded, listening to what people are thinking, where they're coming from, together really embark on the critical thinking path, so that 1 + 1 isn't just 2, it's actually greater than 3. Because together we can think out of the box and think of solutions. So I summarized all these skills and extended them as a cap skill, and we'll go into deeper later on. And not all of these are just IQ, they also expand beyond the other quotients, right? So creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration are the C. And then A is adaptability. We'll go deeper into adaptable later. Machines don't adapt easily if it's not already in the algorithm that's programmed in. So we human beings can adapt, especially when the ever-changing environments, whether it's the political, social, economic, technology, of course, people changes, so we need to adapt. So it's a very powerful concept. And that's a whole area that the Harvard Business School is very focused on these days. We can easily find a lot of articles and research on how do we grow our adaptability. So we talk more about that when we discuss the XQ, transformation quotient. And then P are not just problem solving or people management, also persuasion. How can you make your point heard, understood, and being thought on? And of course, while you're also open-minded and listen to others. So that has a lot to do with communication, asking the right questions and being open-minded and engage in the conversations. And to me, the most powerful way to persuade people is when you're able to facilitate a discussion, asking the right question, and leading the discussion toward the idea that you already have from the very beginning. And then helping the group to arrive at that idea and say, I think we should do that. And the group all say that. And then you say, wow, what a good idea. But it's actually you planting the seeds and the ideas to collectively buy into your idea. And that's very powerful. And of course, when it comes to credits and whose idea it is, then we need to have wisdom, how to determine where the idea came from and how you contribute to this idea from the beginning. And still, most important is knowing how to collaborate and building that right trust and right respectful relationship. So when we say adaptability, it's actually involved many other soft skills. So when you have good IQ, knowing certain hard skill, and now how to adapt using your intelligent quotient learning is to be able to, I wouldn't say just go with the flow, because we need to be grounded in our own value, especially our Christian value and the truth. We need to watch what the environment and the setting are, how are they evolving, and how can we remain grounded while addressing to their need and meet people where they are. And then guide the group and the discussion and the direction toward where it needs to go together. So we want to be adaptable. So we want to go back to the two terms that we talked about last time: self-aware and others-aware. Very powerful and very important. And of course, we as Christians definitely want to be God-aware, because the Holy Spirit is with us all the time. So self-aware, knowing your own humility, your own character, your own position, critical thinking, and then others aware. What are they saying? And then how can we adapt to it? So that involves always communication skills. So I'm very passionate about helping people to communicate, and I learned so much from my 30-some years of career. So very powerful, wherever they're at work or at home. If you don't communicate well, however good all these 8 quotients are, you are not coming across the right way. So the communication skill is so powerful and so important. And then, of course, creative and strategic thinking, interpersonal skill, organizational skill, problem solving, and teamwork. All these can contribute to our adaptability. So last time we went through the 4C maturity stages of how I define intelligent quotient. So we're going to focus on one particular area today. So it's not just curious to gain information. We're going to focus more on critical thinking today, to really how to use that knowledge and then make cause and effect connection in interdependence and ultimately solving problems. So we're going to focus and dive deeper in critical thinking before we get to all the different technology. So I came across recently someone defining these 4 stages of really growing your IQ. And I have some good connection to what I just shared. So above and beyond curiosity on information, we said the second C is the critical thinking. So this is all about critical thinking. You see how they said, if you know a lot of knowledge, that's just the bronze card, right? 铜牌, just bronze level. And then you need to use this knowledge to build up your ability, which is our 3rd and 4th one, which is wisdom and solution, right? So it's your cause and effect and creative solution or problem solving. So that gives you the ability, and that you earn the silver or 银牌, silver medal. And then, of course, we know relationships important, right? We talked about the CAP skill, about people, collaboration, absolutely. Above and beyond all the hard skill on IQ for your bronze and silver, you need to have good relationship, which is your goal. And they said that's not good enough. Ultimately, with all these, that's good. So it goes back to what we said in our 4C, the critical thinking. They said that's your trump card to really dive deep, or they say 王牌. So that is fascinating. It's totally independent. Someone else just shared that. And I said, that is a good correlation. So we're going to go further. So how do we develop critical thinking? So you can see typical graphics will show on the left. First, you want to look at the different data and analyze them. And then how do we communicate and discuss with other people and be open-minded? We said earlier, right? And adapt and listen to what people think. And then together, how can we solve the problem? and come up with creative solutions. So that is a holistic definition of critical thinking. And the one on the right are similar. It goes even deeper to say, when you have some data, you analyze them, you need to have some reasoning and ask questions, whether to yourself or as a group. And they evaluate, looking at the pros and cons and thinking out of the box. So look at each one of these bubbles and think how we can develop and train ourselves and the next generation, so that we don't just take the fake news as the real news, right? We don't just take what people say or opinion as the truth, right? So good news is, for us Christian, we have the Bible as our foundation. And then when we look at data, we analyze and ask questions and test whether the data truly makes sense, and look at it from different scenarios and make the right judgment call and evaluation, and then to make the right decision. So these areas are all good for us to train in our daily life, even whether just watching news or doing real high-tech problem solving. And I'm sure we all have opportunity to do that. So that's something to always think about in these areas to train our critical thinking. Now let's go into the technology cool stuff. So I'm sure we're quite familiar with what are the new technology. We'll go into some examples and some application, and how would those affect us and reshaping the way we live, the way we learn, and the way we lead, and how can we stay ahead. So my husband Dominic always helped me with a lot of good research. So here are some examples, and I love this term and I expanded it. So this is from HR forecast research. So they said it's a future-oriented skill. I call this future-proof, right? If you are preparing yourself in a proactive way, that you'll be future-proof. You're not afraid of what's going to come in the future. So you're very forward-looking. So earlier I showed you the CAP skill for year 2022 and beyond, 2020 and beyond. This one is 2022 and beyond, so very timely. It just came out a few months ago, October 2021. So we'll go deeper later on technology, right? I'm sure many of us are familiar with, and some of us are probably in these areas. Cloud computing, cybersecurity, which is a very big deal, especially, recently, like Scripps. Vincent had that experience, right? They were really sabotaged. And in fact, I have a mentee who worked for Scripps, and they are now working on a very important identity protection. Artificial intelligence, machine learning. I recently took a course from Stanford to learn more about that. And then how do you communicate in the world of AI and ML as well? Big data and analytics, virtual and augmented reality. We'll show some examples later. Blockchain is a very key tool that's needed. Video production, because ultimately it's all about video. It's all about visual, so that people isn't just reading text or listening to audio. It's the video. So video is the king, or content is king, right? And then the user experience. So these were already prevalent when I was in the workforce a few years ago in our company. These were all leading edge and hard work, hard opportunities in our company. And then digital literacy. So digital is a huge trend, especially as we look at everything we do. And I'll tell you, my former CEO, Mr. Randall Stevenson of AT&T, he said, everything is digital. So he said, someday when you leave your house, you only really need your cell phone, because your cell phone is digital, and take care of unlocking your house, unlocking your car, and paying for what you need to purchase. So everything is digital. So of course, many of us are learning these. And then critical thinking, we just talked about. So the way they define it is to have a good understanding of what the problem is and organize the problem. So in any meeting, in any project, it's always good to make sure we ground it and say, what problem are we trying to solve? The first action is to understand the problem statement. And from there, and say, okay, what is the end goal? And then how do we go from here to there? So that's helpful for us to get organized structure in our critical thinking. Always ask. And you'll hear leaders in a business work setting meeting. It's usually the leader who's smart asking, okay, so what problem are we trying to solve? So that's a good question to ask. And of course, don't just ask this in a empty manner. You should have done your homework and help the team to understand what problem you're trying to solve, to articulate that. And then research and analyze the relevant information and do the logical reasoning and discussion. And then adapt and agile thinking, right? So, you know, when you do project management, we have this whole approach called agile approach, so that you can look at the different piece parts and how can you make progress faster. Then we need good self-management, which include our emotions, taking the initiative, self-control, and self-discipline. So in my time management talk, I define these two very differently. Self-control is to do less of those that are time wasters, that are bad habits. So that's self-control. And then self-discipline is to do more of what's healthy habits that are good for using your time, your energy well. So we need both self-control and self-discipline. Then understand our strength. Use our strength. Always ride on your strength, because that's what you can feel most yourself, most confident, and most comfortable. Of course, sometimes we need to stretch ourselves and get out of our own comfort zone, and yet always be centered on your strength. And then, of course, driven and motivated. And of course, we said CQ is character, so your integrity, your whole value system, so your self-management. And then interpersonal skill, you see this biggest box, right? So it isn't just the hard skill, it's a lot about soft skill. So we're not going to go into the detail because we focus on IQ today, but at least we know the CAP skill that I talked about earlier, built on so much on communication, our adaptability and being flexible in our thinking, mental flexibility, building relationship, teamwork, because TEAM, together, everyone accomplishes more. That's what team stands for. And finally, leadership. So that's where we talked about the art of AQ leadership. So these are exciting areas for us to grow so that we are future proof, that we're forward looking, not just the next 5 years, but for the years to come. So there's a McKinsey research, and these 5 graphics are the ones in the flyer for today's workshop, where McKinsey did a really good research analyzing and comparing, and this is critical thinking, right? Comparing the hours spent in 2016 versus the hours spent in 2030. During these 14 years, you see the hours spent and the delta. So the first skill that people spend a lot of time on is the physical and manual skills. 203, some index hours. And then you see the delta, it's reducing. You don't need as much physical and manual because it's so well handled by robots, machines, artificial intelligence. So that's not an area you want to invest in because it's less need for physical and manual. Second area is basic cognitive. So same for the basic cognitive, some of these very well handled by robots and machines. So it's the basic data input and processing. And those can be designed and programmed in algorithm. So that's also decreasing, -15. Then the third area onward is what we need to pay attention to. This is the higher cognitive. So above and beyond what the machine can do, right? So it's the out of the box thinking, the creative solution solving, problem solving, and complex information processing and interpretation to really interpret and extrapolate robots and AI cannot do that if it's outside of the algorithm designed and programmed in. So we want to grow in that area. So we talked earlier, right? The critical thinking and creative thinking and teamwork. And the fourth area, also growing even more, 24, is the social and emotional. So we talked so much about the soft skill. You saw that in the last slide, the largest box. And that's why we have so many leadership courses to help us. And then finally, and we'll focus more in the next few minutes, is the technological. So this is more advanced technology, advanced information technology, digital technology, above and beyond the basics, right? So this is a fastest delta, highest delta, 55, much more to go on digital. So that is the IQ that we want to grow. So as the current CEO of AT&T, Mr. John Stankey, he was very gracious, mentoring me for a short time before my retirement. And as you talk to him and say, what area do you want to pursue? He would give me this answer. He said, you want to follow the money. He didn't say it to mean that, oh, go and find a job where you get the highest pay. That's not what he meant. He meant you follow the money where the industry and the company is making the most investment. You follow the money where the company is going to derive the most revenue. So it's where you see the most revenue and expense. It's where you want to pursue your career and grow your learning in your IQ. So these are examples, right? We saw that in the 2022 and beyond chart. So that goes deeper. And I'm sure some of us are quite involved in these technologies. So we'll go into all types of online later, right? So especially with the pandemic, so much are done online, so powerful, and you get it so quickly. So there's the online shopping, robot deliveries. So our daughter actually works on robot delivery of food on campus. And very cool seeing the video of the robots and the no human involved, knowing how to watch the traffic and cross the road and then deliver the food from the restaurant or take out to the dormitory and the right location. So it's happening. Digital and contactless payments, actually US is probably more behind. And I know for those of us into China, we're a little bit challenged, right? We don't know how to pay without money because they basically don't use cash much. It's all WeChat payment and very contactless payments. So very clean, very convenient, and very easy and accurate. Remote work, right? So all the online work or telecommuting, distance learning, telehealth, like this robot. And these days, especially the elderly, they basically talk to the doctors on the phone and do telehealth or on a video conference. Online entertainment, we'll have a whole list later on. And then supply chain now at 4.0, very hot, very much a challenge right now, right? With the supply chain kind of roadblocks. And then the 3D printing, robotics and drones, especially for delivery and even for intelligence. And then 5G or evolving into 6G even, information communication technology. So all these are the money making, where the revenue and the investments are. So those I know some of us already studying and already expert in these areas. So another way to summarize are the hard skill, and this comes from LinkedIn Teleblog research that we said earlier, blockchain, and this explains to us what is blockchain. It's how it's helping to move data asset. It's very core to a lot of the new technology these days. Cloud computing to help store on the cloud, no longer limited to a device. And analytical reasoning, which is tied to our critical thinking as well. And big data, AI, artificial intelligence. User experience is very important. So back in the day when I was working, one of my last projects was all about customer experience. Ultimately, whatever you deliver isn't about a gadget, isn't about a product. It's about a solution that's enjoyed and used well by the user. that is easy. So of course, good example is Apple, right? How they make the user experience so smooth and convenient and easy on the iPhone and iPad. So user experience, think from the customer perspective. And then business analysis, affiliate marketing, sales, scientific computing, and video production. So video is the king. In the old days, we say content is king. So today, content is equivalent to video. And that's why you have all these cool Snapchats and TikTok and short video clips. And young people are so good with video creation. So that's a good way to grow and learn your IQ toward video production technology. So here are some examples. So we learned so much, and especially in the pandemic. In Chinese, it's very cool, right? 宅宅宅. So we all become 宅男宅女. So it's online of everything, right? Whether it's the takeout, social media, shopping, entertainment, research, working or telecommuting, and then even workout. So these are just brief examples of how the new world is going to look like. And then if you look at this picture, you can see there's a lot of smart technology around the house, around the city, around the community. So all the technology we talked about earlier would contribute to all these smart home, medical care, manufacture, shopping, logistics, and the whole city, how it's run. And of course, we couldn't talk about future without mentioning metaverse. We won't go too much into detail, and I'm certainly not an expert. So if you go back to these two words, what the root meaning is, meta was the Greek word for change, transform, or be after or beyond. So what is going to change? And you can see these two pictures my mentee found really creative. It's a combination of some real people and some virtual people having a conference, a meeting. So we get confused, what is real, what is virtual? So this is so important for us. Make sure we ground it and know and connect with real people and not get absorbed into the virtual world. So many parents ask about, oh, how do we help our teenager to get out of the games and the network addiction and the online game addiction? So that's where parents need to help us and the family to learn the difference between virtual world and the real world. So I always tell parents, it's really how good you are in attracting and promoting a loving, trusting, enjoyable real world experience at home that's competing with the virtual world. Because it's so easy for a teenager or for any of us to go into the virtual world that you may avoid conflicts and all the human being associated challenges. So, and yet we want to help our people to see the real world is where we live and the blessings, and help promote and develop fun games, fun experience, and fun memories, so that your children can leave the virtual world little by little and help to enjoy more of the real world if we can practice the right way of parenting and how we communicate, how we can be more encouraging and doing things that are enjoyed by the family and discussed. So all that is a big competition. So in the metaverse is how to leverage and use the technology to help us, right? So that we don't become the slave to the technology, but we should be the master to the technology. So metaverse is actually a good way to think about using technology, and yet remember it's about change, about transformation. And as we talked about earlier, I think more important is our inside, our transformation. As in Romans 12:2 tell us, right? Do not conform to the world, but we should be transformed and be renewed in our mind, in our spirit. So examples of metaverse are the augmented reality and the virtual reality. And the word verse is like universe, right? It's the space. So these are definitions you can find online. It's the virtual and the reality space interacting, and it's computer generated environment and interacting with each other, like the picture you saw earlier. So this graphics you can easily find online, give you some definition and explanation on AR and VR. So we're not going to go into the detail, and it's kind of fun. And ultimately, I'm going to close on also a preview on what the next 2 weeks will be by a guest speaker, David Tsai. So I've been taking his class on Saturday morning. It's 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. learning about entrepreneurship. And he's very gifted. He's also a pastor. So I learned these few concepts from him, and he'll speak more about that next couple of weeks, where when I connect these two intelligent quotient, how do we evolve from ideas to reality, right? We just talked about the AR and VR. So the reality is really what matters, because the virtual is really here to serve the reality. So we define these 4 stages. Imagination. So it's great for us to imagine, right? Think about some new ideas, and then help us to have creative ideas to bring into some new solutions or new business. And that leads us into innovation. And then eventually would lead us into startup. So in Chinese, it's really cool, right? From 想象 to 创意 to 创新, then to 创业. Then you would bring into 就业. So I think it's a very nice way of thinking these 4 stages, and we'll talk more about that in the next 2 weeks. And when we think about startup, there's a very typical curve in the process, and you learn more about the entrepreneurship and innovation next 2 weeks from David. And this is a standard startup J curve. When you have an idea, you start to create, and you think of how to design the product or service or solution, and then you release it, and then it's called a hockey stick or a J curve, that you always have a downturn, kind of the morph, right? It's like metamorphosis that is evolving. It's got to go through various release and various versions, and then it will become a prototype, a model ready, and finally can go above the line to scale, and then kind of long term, and then harvest your investment. So that's the closing of IQ. So ultimately, we want to go into the small group discussion, because knowing a lot in your head with good IQ is just head knowledge. So we want to bridge what we know in our head to our heart. How do we think about it? How do we feel about it? And how do we assess and have good connection to what we learn, and then to our hands, application. And finally, not just apply once, but really apply multiple times as healthy habits. So in Chinese, it's a very good way to summarize, not just 想到, 学到, 想到, 做到, and then 得到 becomes your own.